Hello. Testing, testing.
The results are in. Tom, you are not. The results are in.
All right. Hello. Welcome back to the My History Verified podcast with your host, Lenora. I am Lenora. I want to say thank you for joining me. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel here and at My History Verified at TikTok. Actually, I actually wanted to save my YouTube lives for the weekend, and that way I kind of gathered enough information that I actually wanted to back up whatever I posted throughout the week. Yesterday, I know it wasn't, let's say 3 days ago. 3 days ago, I went on to MyHeritage. I was able to see my ethnicity results that were, I never took a test with, well, let's back it back. There are going to be some key discussions for today's live. One, it will be the MyHeritage DNA ethnicity results update that rolled out today, August 28, 2023. The second discussion, the Dred Scott case, and hopefully the importance of, and actually third, the importance of the census. And with the two discussions, hopefully they will be able to tie in a thought process for the woke, reclassified African-American, former the Aboriginal, Indigenous, Amerindian, and those getting their or trying to find their way to accepting the truth about what is going on. We know that a lot of people already know what's going on, but throughout time, we've had so many of our ancestors too who have fought in the Indian Wars, fought the oppressor, enslavement, indentured servitude, Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan, everything that we can imagine, and regular overall life, living in a house, being married to someone you don't want to be married to, or have children with, or someone that didn't return back from the wars, or, ran off because they couldn't take, living where they were at, or the person that they were dealing with. So our ancestors went through a lot to get us here. And, you combine that with the oppression, the oppression that they went through, intentionally being denied life and liberty, the pursuit of happiness, being intentionally targeted and slaughtered. They went through all of that, whether they were, directly involved in the Indian Wars or any other wars thereafter, after our colonizers, settlers, or oppressors came to what is now called the United States of America. It's okay. We go back to my history there. My history, and being able to. I think I was doing research. I'm always in my DNA test results. For the record, I've only taken one DNA test, and that was with Ancestry.com. After that, and that was in 2017, and my mom, before passing, had given me the okay. She knew over my lifespan that I wanted to do to actually take a DNA test. And I think about like 3 days before she passed, I discussed it with her again, and she was like, I thought you were going to go and get the test. And then she passed, and I did ultimately take the and give a sample, and I think it was like May or June. So it took 2 months. For some reason, they sent the test back and said that I didn't give enough sample, which was untrue. At that point, I would think that something went wrong with my test. And then when it came back, I also had thoughts of, tampering with the actual sample. Now, I do understand, even though if I'm on TikTok and I'm speaking of DNA, it took a lot for me to go ahead and give a sample, knowing how dirty our oppressors are and what they can do with a sample, and the fact that they lie. And like I think I discussed this with someone. I don't know if I did it on a podcast, but me and a coworker had discussed how they do tamper with all of the past diseases and different things that they imposed upon us, like the Tuskegee experiment. There was the experiment of the Brazilians in the New York area, the Brazilians with the Depo-Provera, that took place as well. And that was most recently, that the Depo-Provera by one of the, I will stop there. If you look it up, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There was a huge lawsuit, I think in 2001, about time 2002 came, that particular attorney was no longer doing class action lawsuits, and they told me that they were actually stationed in Florida. They stated that the case for the Depo-Provera birth control injections, and if you think about, if anyone knows anything about them are kind of, they're different. They take away the natural cycle of a female, and it took a male person to tell me that it was nothing natural about that. So that didn't last too long, because I actually never liked birth control anyway. So when we think about what we're already putting our life in the hands of people that we know don't like us, disrespect us, are racist towards us, mistreat us, and then have the nerve to be taking care of us. So those are huge issues for us. So I do understand when it comes to the DNA test that many people, especially the Aboriginal community on TikTok, do not support the DNA testing. And I understand it totally why they do not. Okay. Taking with the MyHeritage 3 days ago, I'm gonna back up. 3 days ago, I was on the MyHeritage website, my profile, my personal profile. Again, I only did one DNA test with Ancestry.com. I took the DNA data, which is nothing but numbers. You already know that. Thousands of numbers that compute to information. So I took the raw DNA and uploaded it to, of course, MyHeritage and many other websites like My True Ancestry, Family DNA, GenMatch. Now, GenMatch is the only one that I trust, and ironically, they're the main ones that state that they do give out. If law enforcement came to them about results, they are going to submit them. So, ironically, the company that I really trust. And I'm not a person that trusts, but what I'm saying as far as they're not lying about the DNA results. So the results are totally different from Ancestry.com. Now, mind you, the DNA sample was taken by Ancestry.com, and that means whatever their findings were, I took and went to other places with it. Now, we have Ancestry. I'll try to go to more than one angle. GenMatch stuck to giving you the results and beyond that, meaning deep dive matches, the ability to pull up indigenous ancestors or deep dive ancestors. They go back further than the 10 years or the 20 years. They actually go back to ancient ice age and a lot of other testings. MyHeritage. Went there 3 days ago. My test results were there. I was able to see them. I knew that they originally started off the same as Ancestry. They were just slightly different because I originally think that Ancestry had stated that I had Italian, and then soon, for the record, I've had 5 different updates since 2017 with Ancestry, where they initially stated that there was Native American DNA. I don't care how low the percentage is. I think it was like 1.8 originally, 1.8% originally Native American. So what I did was I only had the liking to research just my maternal grandmother. It wasn't until the 3rd year, even though my mother's father's side just felt like dominoes. And when that happens, you already know what that is. It is of white ancestry. Okay, the records are there. They just fall like dominoes. Then we go into, next thing you know, my grandmother, my mother's father's side. No, my mother's father's side began popping up. And of course, there were DNA matches that I didn't even care anything about. Whether it was the first person, second cousin, I didn't care anything about the DNA matches at all. I saw them, they were interesting. and many of them did not match my skin color at all. And so I'll tell you how they manipulated that years down the line. So with my mother's father's side, I began to break that down. Then my mother's side is where the Muscogee Creek Cherokee came in, and it just failed down like dominoes as well. That's going all the way back from the beginning to the Native American that was who I don't know who her mother is. I only have who they say her mother is, even though she's 100% full-blooded Muscogee Creek and a Berry Hill. So when we move towards me, so we're saying 14 generation, 13 generation, and we move towards the 3rd generation and the 4th generation, they are still being deemed white or indigenous. When we get to my mother's mother, she is white, but when she had the children by the Roach that I actually did a post on at TikTok, who is the descendant of Pocahontas's sister, and he is a Pamunkey, Powhatan, Shawnee, and Cherokee. So when we get to now, we're going into the 3rd generation, which would be my mother's great grandmother. Okay, that would be my great grandmother. Then we have still white and indigenous. So we move into when she had the children with the Roach, who is who has enrollment. Then she, who is deemed white, is then deemed black. Okay, even though she's white. So I'm going to tie it in with my heritage, trying to bring you forward. All right, so then we have my mother's father's side, who is also white. But if you see my grandfather, he's pitch black, but his mother is white. His mother's mother is deemed white. And then we jump to my father's side. One side is mulatto with white grandfather, white great grandfather, and then my father's father, all the way back from father, is white. MyHeritage DNA then puts up a notice that in 2 days it will be updating the ethnicity DNA results. So I already knew, because I've been pondering 2 issues. The first is in December 2020, China bought Ancestry.com. So I thought that there was going to be a huge issue with it, and it wasn't. What I did notice is more documents, and especially about the indigenous, begin to be released under China. I personally saw the article. I personally reviewed the article at the time it dropped, and I could have sworn I print screened it. I do not know where it's at. So we have December 2020. We flipped it into January 2021, and then it is sold. Come to find out, they stated it was sold to China. Come to find out, it was sold to BlackRock. There you're going to have a huge issue. Give me a second. A huge issue with the DNA. Open up MyHeritage profile. The ethnicity results are there. I went from 12 or 18% Nigerian to 56% Nigerian. My Mesoamerican DNA, gone. The Italian DNA, gone. The indigenous American DNA, gone. Gone. It's frustrating to know that how easily that they are able to manipulate what they want. And as I do more and more research, especially seeing all of the Indian wars, how close they are to me, how close and relative they are to me in familiar relationships by DNA, in books, family listed in books or reports or documents or military records. And it's just mind-blowing how they believe that they, to this day, 2023, that they can manipulate the DNA as they've done. Ancestry has already done it. Remember, I told you they gave me 5. I actually have 5 DNA updates from Ancestry.com alone. And those DNA updates originally gave me Native American and then changed the next year to Indigenous North. Then taken away from me altogether. By the 4th year, given back. And then this year, taken away. That's Ancestry in itself. None of my results match. Sorry, none of my matches, none of my records or my matches reflect my documentation or my ancestors at all. At all. It's frustrating. Especially with having ancestors that died for this very same reason of trying to hold on to their identity, land, and existence. It's all tied into identity, land, and existence. In the next 10 years, and those whose children don't know and don't have the same zeal or fight regarding this, they're going to keep. I don't know. It's just sad to know how they're looking for the future of their children and descendants, of making sure that they keep the land and the power and control in their hands and able to leave it behind for their descendants. It's like they feel like they're going to live forever. I'm talking about the old ass politicians that are alive today. It just seems like how they write the laws and how they do their thing is as if they are going to be, and it looks like they really believe they're going to be alive forever. And so they have no remorse about the land. And reading the treaties and how they just took the land and then lied and then removed them and then forced removal. even though we know many did not go to Oklahoma. Even here in Illinois, you still have, even though there are no reservations, we still have Indians that live throughout Illinois. I didn't even know that. And they're definitely in Wisconsin. Now, I do know that. And I know that there are reservations there. So when we have the DNA issue of giving someone, no matter the age, no matter who they're related to, they can be related to you, but what I'm saying is they're not in your immediate family. They can be your fifth cousin, or according to DNA, totally different brother, sister, uncle, auntie, and yet they still deem us all nearly 89% African. And then we wonder why we have so many people, or the Aboriginals on TikTok, pissed off about the use of the classification Black or African American. And on my end, when I think about both of those terms or those classifications, is because as long as you're still marking them on your applications and your taxes and your censuses and your job applications to go to the hospital, when whoever is asking you for your race or ethnicity, if you're marking Black and African American, then your argument is either just going to be one to teach of the misnomers, and not the fact that you are putting your money where your mouth is. Unless you're marking other or Mary Indian on those applications and censuses, to be on TikTok arguing and threatening each other about it is ludicrous. Me, on the other hand, I have tested the waters by putting white on the application, and I've gotten the job. And I did it to see if they will hire me. Just was doing something. They called me in, did the interview, and I got hired. No mention of race at all. They probably thought I made a mistake, and they probably corrected it on their own. That's how I look at it. That's like 20 years ago. The other thing is the census. It's very important that whatever you do in the next 10 years, the next census is 2030. Whatever you mark on the census from here to now, and remember what happened in 2020, a lot of us wasn't meant to be here. And that all has to do with land, still, land, power, and identity. The 2023 census is important, and what you do from here on forward with your applications to Social Security, whatever, Department of Human Services, whatever you mark on those applications and papers are very, very important. As long as you have the documentation to back you up that you are a Mary Indian, what's the censuses and birth certificates, death certificates from your ancestors, and the Indian rolls, the reclassifications from a Mary Indian to the African American classification. As long as you have that documentation, I have the guts, and I have been changing in the past 2 to 3 years, checking the box of Mary Indian and other, and I will occasionally do white. I don't want to do white where that will give them the financial funding or the political power that they're after. Therefore, to me, it just makes sense to break that cycle that way, to me. I don't know about anyone else. Just share with those you know that it is important that that census and the documents from here forward to the 2030 census is very, very important. Mark my word. It was just as important in 2020. We just didn't know that. Had we really known at 2020 that what the census people came around probably, I think it was June. I think it was June, a couple of months before the election. Just think that we missed the opportunity to begin claiming Amerindian on the census. And then they have this huge plan of whatever took place with the vaccination tax. So I wanted to cover that. Important with the census. All right, MyHeritage. I want to show you how this mess looks. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm still waiting for it to populate. All right, there we go. This is MyHeritage. I don't know why I keep saying My History Verified, but that's just how it is. I like my little name. All right, so I am in the screen here. And I am going to pull up the test results. All right, still waiting for it to populate. I don't know why. All right, they are there. To the left there, you will see I am at 52.4% Nigerian. I originally started off at 12%. I have no 4.1% Sierra Leone with Ancestry.com. I don't have any Kenyan with Ancestry.com. The rest African would be Cameroon, I believe, Mali, Senegal. What else? Did I say Cameroon? I think Benin, Togo as well. So the 52.4% plus the 16.3% plus the 11.2 plus the 4.1. It does not match the indigenous paperwork or documentation that I have. Does not match it at all. The Irish, Scottish, and Welsh does. The Italian even though there are Italian ancestors, here you see that MyHeritage gave me 5.4% of it. The Finnish, which is with the Swedish and Norwegian, I have the Norwegian with the Ancestry.com results. The Filipino, they never take away from me. And actually, that's more than 1.5%. So let me move it up a little bit. They never take the Filipino away from me. Ludicrous. If you look on the map at the United States, you'll see the green. That's giving me, they're trying to say that's where all of my African come from, right? Now, mind you, it used to be that all of the European blood is from that area. How can my African blood be from the East Coast? That's where all my ancestors, the Powhatans and the Tuscaroras, are from. But they say it's African blood. So this is what's going on with the test. They are intentionally, at this point, tampered with. We already know that they were already tampered. We already know that. There's nowhere in the world that you can, everybody has freaking 80, nearly 86% African. There's no way. Everybody has that percentage. In my mind, since I know what all I know about my DNA test, guess what? I flip that. I flip it. I want to cuss. I flip it. So it's like an hourglass. And then that's not a good analogy or correlation, because when you flip it, the sand is just going to go down. So flip the, instead of 98%, I mean, let's say 82%, and the 18% is other, let's flip it, and the 18% is the African, if any. And then the 82% is Amerindian indigenous. It's just not making sense. One moment they want to give you the deep dive blood, which is like the Nefertiti, the Olmecs. They want to give you the ancient blood, but then try to deny you the Amerindian blood, which is within the last 10 generations or more. They don't want to give you that. They'll give you the European blood, but they don't want to give you the indigenous blood. Why? Because the indigenous blood is attached to the land, the identity, and the power. And it's as if they're going to keep on trying to hold on to these old, ashy people are just continuously making laws, continuously making sure that as if we can never, ever come up. It's disappointing. It's very disappointing. I'm going to go into my ancestry test. In a second to pull it up. Ooh, that's not what I want. I've had 5 different ancestry tests. 5. So here you'll see I have Nigerian at 18%. This is the original test, but with 5 updates. They've taken my meso from here as well. They've taken my indigenous, although all of my DNA matches all have from 1% up to, some of them have up to 50% indigenous blood. And I'm going to show you where the last update for Ancestry is. Give me a second. Did it move up? All right, there we go. So they're good. There you see the Norwegian. The Norwegian and Ireland and Wales is usually together. They've broken it up. I was told that the reason why in 2017, the reason why the indigenous blood was so low, at that time they was calling it Native American DNA Ancestry. I've spoken with them personally in 2017. They said the reason why that DNA percentage is so low is because the samples, none of the chiefs around the 17 were allowing anyone to take DNA tests. They just begun to allow them to take the test in, I think, 2001 or 2002. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, it took them 5 years to allow their tribal members to take the DNA test. And that's where the samples are coming from. And many people are talking about, if Africans are not taking a test, where are you getting your samples from? The deep dives from Nefertiti or the Olmecs? Who are you getting your test results from to give all of these Amerindians in the United States deemed African Americans? Where are you getting their samples from? And as you can see, I have 18% Nigerian here. So why did MyHeritage take me from 18% Nigerian to 52.4% Nigerian? Freaking ridiculous. I don't know if anyone else have taken the test, but they are ridiculous. It's getting worse and worse. It's getting worse and worse. And then to see the people argue about minute stuff when they should be trying to have representation go and start with laws getting changed or something. If you find the right person to speak up, or I guess it would be all in a petition, or getting an attorney to overturn some things. Now here, I'm going to stay on Ancestry just for a few more minutes. And then here you'll see where it says the last Ancestry test was updated June 2022. Can you see me here? Okay, there we go. I have to click the screen. All right, so right here, where the arrow is pointing, it says view previous estimates. I'm going to click here. All right, it's taking longer to propagate. All right, this is my 2022, actually last April 2022. As you can see, the Indigenous American, North American is there. I don't care if it's 1% or not. 1%, if I have 1% and I get 50% of my mother, who is the carrier of the Muscogee tribe and the Powhatan and the Shawnee and a few other tribes, Cherokee, and who is it, Tuscarora. It's impossible for me to have 1% Indigenous anything. And if I have 1%, and I did not a DNA, but DNA markers for my 25-year-old, and she has Mexican blood, which is of the Muscogee Creek tribe, I already know, and it's going to the Mesoamerican and the Olmecs. I already know she has it. I've seen those markers, and I've looked up those markers myself in, let's see, 2010, 2011. If I have 1%, that would mean my mom probably has 5 or could have more. And then her mother can have more. And then her mother can have more, right? And then her mother can have more until we get to that Indigenous person. So that therefore it would be ludicrous for anyone to try to tell you that, oh, 1% is nothing. When the Indigenous or the quote unquote American Indians or those on the rest, their argument is they don't have to do a DNA test because it goes by documentation. So it actually trumps doing any DNA, but the DNA is for the matches. That is how I was able to confirm my ancestor to ancestor. So even at 1%, anybody arguing what an individual person's percentage is foolish, because their parents will have more, and then their parents will have more, and then their parents will have more. And because they are my parents and my ancestors, wouldn't that be me? Okay, so those type of arguments are foolish. As you can see, the Indigenous here, MyHeritage took it away, and so did, we can go back into that test result again. Back to the one that is current today at Ancestry.com. They took that Mary Indian away. Took it away. It's just a game. It's a game. And they get their orders from the top, because it all has to do with land. If they take land and give treaties and killed off your ancestors, and then throw our black men in jail, so there go our manpower right there. Do you really think that they are going to just give us this land back? California is doing it for what reason? I still don't know their reason. It's a nice gesture. It's good to hear. But here's the thing with that. Those persons that sued for their ancestors' land knew that that was their ancestors' land. They got an attorney. The attorney, they were able to prove lineage, the rightful owners at that time, and then that is how they were able to argue and get that land back. I wonder what their argument was about, because if the Indians fought and treaties were issued, what was the content or the verbiage in the treaty, and what is it that the lawyer argued against and for in order to win and then get the state of California to pay reparations? Or actually, they didn't give reparations. They gave the land back. and then it was sold back to California. So it's very important to find out what was the verbiage of the argument of the attorney to get to win that land back. So that would be an interesting point to utilize. All right, so I am going to leave out Ancestry. There's something. I'm going to go on my tree. All right, my tree is full. Down here is my Berry Hill side. This is my Muscogee Creek family. These blue dots here is what lets me know that that's a DNA match, and that's how I'm definitely able to prove my family tree branches or the ancestors. So if we start on this side here, here is a DNA match that proves I'm related to this line here and here. This Berry Hill line is my mother's line, and that's that red book I showed you guys on the TikTok for the Berry Hill family. These are your Muscogee Creeks. And so you see my DNA matches are there. The Powhatan tribe, DNA match here, DNA match here. And then here's the Powhatan tribe. Well, it's just not Powhatan. It's actually Powhatan, Cherokee, Pamunkey, and the not Tuscarora, and the Powhatan. My tree don't match the DNA results. They just don't. If I keep going, these branches are going to keep on going. They're going to keep on going. This Benford is the first line that broke all the way down with DNA matches. It's been a long time since I've been to Benfords. That's because they that was the easiest to break down. Okay, I'm gonna come out of there. The next subject I'm going to tie in with the MyHeritage DNA updates and the census, the Dred Scott versus Sanford. I read this recently. I did. I have a I have a TikTok short, actually a TikTok video and a TikTok short regarding a particular subject. I'm going to bring that one up. Still trying to get it. All right. This is the Dred Scott case. I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's the 1857 U.S. Supreme Court decision for Sanford versus Scott. Sanford is the plantation owner of Scott, where Scott was enslaved. It says, known as the Dred Scott decision, which has never been overturned, has made it clear that no descendant of Africans can be a citizen of the United States of America. This current state of affairs leaves those descendants of African Moors who are unfamiliar with international law. The United Nations second decade of the world's indigenous peoples, and the fact that they can now self-identify themselves as indigenous of tribal, or as identify themselves as indigenous or tribal, unable to have a nationality or the ability to identify and claim their indigenous heritage in accord with House Joint Resolution 194. 1857, 8 years before the Emancipation Proclamation, Dred Scott took his slave owner to court, stating that because he lived in free territory, free land, on free land, that he was free as well. They deemed that no African, no Moor, no indigenous person, no one who can self-identify themselves as indigenous or tribal could identify or had the ability to identify or claim their indigenous heritage. I am going to go and read further to Dred Scott, and then that it was overturned. What do you do with your ancestry and your genealogy? What do you do with it? Just sitting on it, or just sitting on TikTok arguing about it, and not trying to move forward with one, claiming the maternal lineage of the indigenous tribe that your mom's family is blood related to. You're supposed to be following that tribe, that lineage, maternal lineage. The paperwork as far as enrollment, and I've had mine's ready since March 2020, the week COVID shut down. I had my documents ready. I think when everything opened back up by the 2021, I was able to get them notarized, the documents notarized. By 2022, the freaking documents are I got copies of them, but the original birth certificates and everything, just whatever. So I'm missing one birth certificate, one death certificate, I think, of the Muscogee Creek grandmother. Now I have the one from her mother, but my grandmother's death certificate I don't have. That's the only one I don't have, but I have that great grandmother's mother's birth and death, which is the Muscogee Creek tribe that I will be enrolling in. Now, my mother's mother is Tuscarorean. And then remember the Powhatan. So it's just overall, I guess, getting in line with we already accepting, but I'm talking about really getting in line and in tune with their fight and then I don't know, carrying on the fight, and then also moving into place naturally and holistically. For me, that is something that I am currently doing. But I am going to read the Dred Scott. Still waiting on my screens to come up. I wanted to say thank you for joining me. Now, this document is continuing up with the Dred Scott versus Sanford in 1857. It has been recorded and stored with the National Archives. I'm going to go ahead and begin the reading. This one is actually not that long. So I'll begin. Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857. In this ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court stated that enslaved people were not citizens of the United States and therefore could not expect any protection from the federal government or the courts. The opinion also stated that Congress had no authority to ban slavery from a federal territory. In 1846, an enslaved Black man named Dred Scott and his wife Harriet sued for their freedom in St. Louis Circuit Court. They claimed they claimed that they were free due to their residence in a free territory where slavery was prohibited. The odds were in their favor. They had lived with their enslaver, an army sergeant or surgeon at Fort Snelling, then in the free territory of Wisconsin. The Scots' freedom could be established on the grounds that they had been held in bondage for extended periods in a free territory and were then returned to a slave state. Courts had ruled this way in the past. However, what appeared to be a straightforward lawsuit between two private parties became an 11-year legal struggle that culminated in one of the most notorious decisions ever issued by the United States Supreme Court. Scott lost his case, which worked its way through the Missouri state courts. He then filed a new federal suit, which ultimately reached the Supreme Court. On its way to the Supreme Court, the Dred Scott case grew in scope and significance as slavery became the single most explosive issue in American politics. By the time the case reached the High Court, it had come to have enormous political implications for the entire nation. On March 6, 1857, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney read the majority opinion of the court, which stated that enslaved people were not citizens of the United States and therefore could not expect any protection from the federal government or the courts. The opinion also stated that Congress had no authority to ban slavery from a federal territory. This decision moved the nation a step closer to the Civil War. The decision of Scott versus Sanford, considered by many legal scholars to be the worst ever rendered by the Supreme Court, was overturned by the 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution, which abolished slavery and declared all persons born in the United States to be citizens of the United States. Big difference between United States and United States of America. So I hope those that know that there is a difference. All right, United States of America is a corporation. I'm also going to read from the archives.gov.com. Waiting for my screen to come up. How we identify on the census is a huge, huge deal. All right. Remember, the petitioner for this case was Dred Scott. The respondent was John F.A. Sanford. They issued no docket number for it. It was decided by Tenney Court. The citation 60 U.S. 393 in 1857. The advocates for Dred Scott was Montgomery Blair. It was argued on February 11th through the 18th of 1856. George Tickner Curtis was also for Dred Scott, and for Mr. Sanford was Henry S. Gayer. The case was decided, looks like a year later, March 6, 1857. The facts of the case was Dred Scott was a slave in Missouri from 1833 to 1843. Sorry. He decided in, he resided in Illinois, and we have to think about that. 1833 to 1843. Do you really think Dred Scott was an African, or was he indigenous? Knowing that in Illinois is indigenous territory. 1833 through 1843. This is around the time many of the indigenous tribes were being removed by the 1812 Andrew Jackson Indian Removal Acts from their territorial or tribal lands and being pushed westward. So do you really think that Dred Scott at that time was an African or a slave? I mean, African or an indigenous, Aboriginal, Amerindian. And I'm thinking he was a Amerindian. He resided in Illinois, a free state, and in the Louisiana Territory, where slavery was forbidden by the Missouri Compromise of 1820. After they've just made laws after laws to just keep actually, slavery was forbidden by Missouri in 1820. And that's ironic because Missouri is Ku Klux Klan headquarters, in addition to Indiana being KKK headquarters. All right, so after returning to Missouri, Scott filed suit in Missouri court for his freedom, claiming that his residence in free territory made him a free man. After losing, Scott brought a new suit in federal court. Scott's master maintained that no Negro or descendant of slaves could be a citizen in the sense of Article 3 of the Constitution. And the question is, was Dred Scott free or a slave? Prisoner of war, I guarantee you he was. In conclusion, the majority held that a Negro whose ancestors were imported into the U.S., so they're saying that his relative, that his ancestors were brought in. I guarantee you they probably weren't. And sold as slaves, whether enslaved or free, could not be an American citizen and therefore did not have standing to sue in federal court because the court lacked jurisdiction. Tenney dismissed the case on procedural grounds. The court lacked jurisdiction to hear a case where the ancestors were imported. So it appears that the federal court is basically for the colonizer and the settler, not even for the indigenous prisoner of war. So it basically are three different laws. Because the court lacked jurisdiction, Taney dismissed the case on procedural grounds. Taney further held that the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was unconstitutional and foreclosed Congress from freeing slaves within federal territories. The opinion showed deference to the Missouri courts, which held that moving to a free state did not render Scott emancipated. Finally, Taney ruled that slaves were property under the Fifth Amendment and that any law that would deprive a slave owner of that property was unconstitutional. In dissent, Benjamin Robbins Curtis criticized Taney for addressing the claim's substance after finding the court lacked jurisdiction. He pointed out that invalidating the Missouri Compromise was not necessary to resolve the case, and cast doubt on Taney's position that the founders categorically opposed anti-slavery laws. John McLean echoed Curtis, finding the majority improperly reviewed the claim's substance when its holdings should have been limited to procedure, meaning that he just was supposed to rule and not allow argument on the case. He also argued the men of African descent could be citizens because they already had the rights to vote in 5 states. These are the laws that they write for us, and this is how they constantly keep us from rights, land, liberty, justice, pursuit of happiness, identity, and the right to exist. And the right to exist. Now, we've discussed the MyHeritage update. And henceforward, everybody else is probably going to follow suit. Ged Match, I am going to watch closely to see if they are going to make the changes to their ethnicity results as well. The only changes that I do see is them giving more Amerindian, because from 2017 to now, I have had 1% DNA, and you're supposed to add Oceania and Asian into those percentage factors, increasing the makeup of the Amerindian or the indigenous person. Okay. Some of the Asian blood is Mongolian, so that doesn't actually count as the Amerindian blood, but there is some Asian blood. I'm not sure if it's North Asian, East Asian, or Central. One of them, or Southern. Two of them is the makeup of the Amerindian blood. We were able to discuss the MyHeritage DNA update, and I henceforth will look out for the Ged Match to see if they will make any changes. I hope that they don't, but for the most part, I've seen positive changes of them giving more Amerindian than taken away. This is where it's going to come in at, because we have to think they are on TikTok, they're on YouTube, and they are seeing what's being said and what's being argued about the Amerindian and the Native American. And now what's going on in Africa, the fall of the dollar, the knowledge of stolen Amerindian land. They know what's going on. They is no doubt about it. For them to be now playing with the numbers, with the DNA, it's as if they were just, they didn't just follow suit. They probably was more than likely, approached about it, and they just follow suit. All right. The DNA results, the Dred Scott case, and knowing your rights, standing up for the rights, the census, having an understanding of ethnicity and DNA with the census, and choosing the right classification that supports your DNA makeup rather than the classification of African or African American or Black that they gave us. If we have documentation and we know that it was a reclassification, and it is documented that they intentionally did the reclassification for whatever purposes, the DNA is what's the truth. So we have until we leave this earth to mark the correct ethnicities on applications, and I guess with the census. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, and hopefully we get some conversation going about the DNA changes that looks to be intentional. How do they sleep at night? How do we approach them? How do we get a discussion with them where they just do not think that they don't have to answer to the groups of people or the generalization of the African Americans that they're hurting? It all has to do with land. All right, so I am going to go ahead and close. And I thank you all for sticking with me. I don't know who that is that has stuck around, but I really appreciate you. I already know who it could be, because I've seen a certain person be interactive in the comments, and then henceforth on TikTok. So I really can't do any assuming, but I really appreciate you for listening, from beginning to end, or whatever point you came in with joining me. I really, really thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you have any recommendations on what you would like for me to research in the future, go ahead and leave that in the comments. I will do my best to be able to gather a piece for you. Don't forget to listen to my podcast and subscribe. Also share as well. And thank you very much.
you.